Mateo Santana, CEO of an $800 million supermarket chain, was conducting his monthly inspection at the Vallecas store when he witnessed a scene that would change his life forever. A young woman with a baby in her arms and a 4-year-old girl holding her hand approached the checkout with just 3 items: powdered milk, diapers, and a loaf of bread. When the cashier announced the total of $27, the woman counted and recounted the coins in her wallet. Then, her voice breaking with embarrassment, she said, "I'm sorry, I'll have to put the milk back." Mateo watched as this mother returned the can of baby formula while her infant cried from hunger and her little girl tugged at her skirt, asking when they were going to eat. In that moment, the millionaire who had built an empire selling food to Spanish families realized a devastating truth. While he counted millions in profits, some mothers had to choose between feeding their children and paying rent. What he did after that encounter wasn't just an act of charity. It was the start of a revolution that would transform Spain and the lives of thousands of families. But first, he had to confront the darkest secret behind his success. Mateo Santana had never shopped in one of his own supermarkets like a regular customer. At 42, the man who had turned a small neighborhood store into a chain of 347 locations across Spain knew his business only through quarterly reports, profit margins, and sales statistics delivered to his penthouse office in the Madrid headquarters. That November morning, he decided to make a surprise inspection at the underperforming Vallecas store, one he was considering closing. Dressed in his usual gray Armani suit and Italian shoes that cost more than a monthly salary for one of his employees, he walked the aisles, mentally noting every detail that fell short of corporate standards. His life was a perfectly tuned machine of efficiency and profit. He woke at 5:30 a.m. in his 4,300 square foot mansion in La Moraleja, worked out for 45 minutes in his private gym, read financial reports over breakfast prepared by household staff, and arrived at the office before 8 a.m. for a day that rarely ended before 10 p.m. He had no family. His marriage had ended 5 years earlier when his wife grew tired of being married to a man who measured everything in revenue and annual growth. His stores were scientifically designed to maximize customer spending. Essentials placed at the back to force shoppers through the entire store, impulse items at eye level, layouts engineered to slow people down and encourage unplanned purchases. Mateo didn't see customers as people, he saw them as data points generating revenue to optimize profits and margins. That morning, he was analyzing the dairy section placement. Baby products were strategically positioned next to luxury items to create a psychological contrast that pushed parents to spend more. That's when he noticed a scene he initially dismissed as routine customer management. A young woman approached the checkout with tired steps, carrying a baby no older than 3 months and leading a blonde 4-year-old girl who dragged her feet from exhaustion. The woman was no more than 25. She wore a worn jacket that had seen better days and faded jeans. But what struck Mateo was the mix of determination and desperation on her face. In her cart were just 3 carefully placed items: a container of baby formula, a pack of diapers, and a whole wheat loaf of bread. Mateo automatically noted the prices: formula $14, diapers $11, bread $2, and mentally calculated the total as she got in line. The cashier, a woman in her 50s whom Mateo recognized from employee files as Mrs. Rodriguez with 15 years of service, scanned the items with mechanical efficiency. When the screen showed $27, the young mother opened a worn faux leather wallet, the seams frayed and splitting. What followed was a scene Mateo would replay in his mind for years. She began counting coins with slightly trembling hands. 50 cents, $1, $2, another 50 cents. She arranged them on the conveyor belt, recounted, grouped them by value, counted again. The baby started crying, that sharp, desperate wail of a hungry infant. The older girl tugged at her mom's skirt, asking in a thin voice when they could go home to eat. Mateo unconsciously moved closer, hiding behind a magazine rack. Fascinated by this mathematics of survival he had never seen up close. She had exactly $16.30. She was short $10. 70, an insignificant amount to him, but clearly impossible for her. The cashier waited with professional patience, showing neither judgment nor particular empathy, a scene she had likely witnessed many times in this neighborhood. Other customers lined up behind her, some checking their watches with growing impatience. That's when the woman said the words that would haunt Mateo for weeks. "I'm sorry, I'll have to put the milk back." Her voice broke not from embarrassment alone, but from deep exhaustion, as if she had hoped until the last moment to have enough, but always known she wouldn't. She handed the formula back to the cashier, who set it aside without comment. The screen now showed $13 for the bread and diapers. She recounted her money this time with more confidence and handed it over along with 3 crumpled dollar bills from her back pocket. As the cashier prepared change and bagged the items, the baby cried louder. The little girl asked with devastating innocence, "Mommy, what about milk for my baby brother?" The mother knelt down, stroked her blonde hair, and whispered something Mateo couldn't hear, but it made the girl smile. Watching this, Mateo felt something he hadn't in years: shame. Not social embarrassment, but deep moral shame, the kind that hits when you realize you've lived in a bubble completely disconnected from reality. As they left the store, the mother with a baby crying more desperately, the girl skipping unaware of the tragedy, Mateo stood frozen among the magazines, realizing this woman had just endured one of the most humiliating moments of her life in his store, at his prices, under his commercial empire. That night, in his silent, perfectly climate-controlled mansion, Mateo couldn't eat. He kept hearing the baby's cry, the girl's innocent question, seeing the mother's look as she chose between feeding her child and buying diapers to prevent rashes. For the first time in 20 years of business, the numbers in his reports no longer felt abstract. They reflected real human lives, families struggling daily against poverty while he optimized profits. In the days that followed, Mateo couldn't focus on his usual financial reports. The image of that mother forced to return the formula kept tormenting him, turning every business decision into a moral dilemma. During board meetings, as executives discussed price increases for the next quarter, he saw the face of that little girl asking about milk for her brother. He decided to return to the Valicus store, not as a CEO inspecting, but as a silent observer of the reality he had ignored his whole life. He dressed in jeans and a hoodie, put on sunglasses and a baseball cap, and spent hours in the aisles studying customers with completely new eyes. What he saw shocked him. Mothers calculating every penny before adding anything to their cart. Seniors comparing prices for minutes to choose the cheapest option, entire families splitting up across aisles to save time and find the best deals. He had built an empire selling food, but now understood that for many, grocery shopping was a daily battle against the humiliation of poverty. On his second day of observation, he saw the same woman again, this time alone. She had clearly left the kids somewhere and held a list written on a crumpled piece of paper. He followed at a distance as she moved efficiently through the store, skipping unnecessary aisles, grabbing only sale items or store brands, checking every price with the obsessive attention of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. At checkout, she had 9 items: pasta, rice, milk, bread, a pack of hot dogs, bruised bananas on sale, dish soap, diapers, and children's Tylenol. The total was $23.40. This time she had the exact amount, which she counted twice before handing it over with a shy smile of triumph. Mateo followed her out, keeping a respectful distance, and watched her walk 15 minutes to a 1970s public housing block with peeling plaster and windows repaired with duct tape. He saw her climb 5 flights of stairs. The elevator was broken, with heavy grocery bags weighing down her thin arms. That night, Mateo called his HR director and asked for information on the Valicus store employees. He wanted to understand the neighborhood, the customers, the social conditions. What he learned hit him like a punch in the gut. 40% of local families lived below the poverty line. Youth unemployment topped 35%. And many of his most loyal customers juggled to afford basic necessities. The HR director, assuming the CEO was evaluating closure due to low profitability, started listing problems: low margins, low spending customers, rising theft. Mateo stopped him mid-sentence, realizing he had built a system that treated customer poverty as a problem to solve by closing stores instead of lowering prices. That night, in his silent mansion, Mateo made a decision that would change everything. He called his assistant and asked for detailed data on all stores in low income neighborhoods. How many families they served, what percentage of income they spent there, how many children went to bed hungry because parents couldn't complete their shopping. The data that arrived in the following days was devastating. His stores in poor areas had 25% profit margins on baby products, double the European average. A family with two young children spent an average of $150 a month just on milk, diapers, and baby food, nearly 20% of the area's median income. And the most shocking stat. According to market research his own company had commissioned, 30% of mothers admitted skipping meals to ensure their children had enough. Mateo realized his success was literally built on the hunger of Spanish children. Every time he had raised prices to improve margins, he had forced families into impossible choices between basic needs. His $800 million empire was stained by the cries of babies who couldn't be fed because formula was too expensive for their mothers. On his third visit to the Vallecas store, Mateo had made a decision his financial advisors would call insane. He called an emergency meeting with all staff and announced something revolutionary. All baby products would be sold at cost, zero profit margin. Additionally, any mother unable to complete a purchase for her children could access an anonymous family fund. The store manager pointed out this would destroy profitability. Mateo looked him in the eye. Good. It's about time. In the days that followed, as the legal team structured the No Child Without Milk program, Mateo watched the first effects. The mother who had returned the formula came back the following Tuesday, unaware of the changes. At checkout, her total was half what it had been. Thinking it was a mistake, the cashier explained the new company program. Mateo watched that mother break down in tears of gratitude. For the first time in months, she could buy everything without choosing. She left with 3 bags instead of 1, walking with a lighter step. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. The store filled with families, some coming from farther away. Against all predictions, sales rose 40% in 2 weeks. Families saving on milk and diapers spent the money in other departments. The success in Vallecas convinced Mateo to revolutionize the entire company. He called a board meeting and presented the Dignity Revolution, extend the program to all 347 stores, selling all essentials, milk, bread, pasta, rice, over-the-counter medicine, at cost for families in need. The reaction was explosive. The CFO calculated a 60% drop in profits. The marketing head called it unfair competition. The managing director threatened to resign. But Mateo had the Vallecas data. Increased sales, customer loyalty, overall revenue growth, and most importantly, letters of thanks from families. The vote was close, 6 against, 5 in favor, 1 abstention. As majority shareholder, Mateo pushed it through despite management opposition. The rollout transformed public perception of the Santana chain. Media told stories of families saved from food poverty. The deepest change was in Mateo himself. The man who once optimized profits discovered new satisfaction in the smiling faces of mothers. He personally visited every store, not to check numbers, but to listen to stories and understand needs. The transformation required sacrifices. He sold the mansion, liquidated his art collection, gave up the private jet. But every loss felt insignificant compared to the joy of seeing children fed and mothers no longer forced to choose between dignity and survival. 1 year after launching the Dignity Revolution, Mateo faced consequences he hadn't foreseen, some wonderful, others devastating. His chain became an international case study in ethical capitalism, analyzed by economics universities. Business delegations came from across Europe to understand how profit and social justice could coexist. The final numbers surprised even Matteo. Despite slashing margins on essentials, overall revenue rose 35%. Families who once shopped with anxiety and shame now came confidently, spending savings on other items. Customer loyalty hit record highs, and marketing costs dropped to nearly zero. Positive word of mouth replaced advertising. But success came at a personal cost. 6 board members resigned, selling their shares and publicly accusing Mateo of betraying free market principles. Some competitors launched smear campaigns, claiming the dignity revolution was just a PR stunt hiding tax evasion. The hardest battle was with his ex-wife, who resurfaced with a lawsuit demanding a larger share of assets, arguing his philanthropic madness was impoverishing property that was partly hers. The once amicable divorce turned into a tabloid war. But it was during this personal battle that Mateo had the encounter that truly changed his life forever. At the Madrid courthouse, waiting for a hearing in his ex-wife's case, he noticed a young lawyer defending evicted families pro bono. Pro bono. She was beautiful, determined, and spoke about the rights of the poor with a passion that immediately captivated him. Her name was Elena Marquez, 30 years old, and she devoted 60% of her legal work to unpaid cases for families in financial hardship. When Mateo approached to introduce himself after the hearing, she recognized him instantly as the millionaire giving away milk to the poor and looked at him with distrust that completely threw him. Elena had read about his social initiatives but remained skeptical of a rich businessman's sudden discovery of philanthropy. When Mateo asked if he could buy her coffee to discuss his charitable work, she replied sharply that she had no time for chats with millionaires seeking cheap redemption. The challenge was set. Mateo, who had conquered every professional goal he set, found himself, for the first time, having to prove the sincerity of his motives to a woman unimpressed by his wealth, demanding concrete proof of commitment. 2 years after meeting Elena, Mateo had transformed not just his company, but his entire existence. The lawyer's initial distrust gradually turned to respect, then deep love, born from sharing a daily commitment to the vulnerable. Sometimes the real revolution starts when you choose to lose money to give people dignity. And sometimes the greatest love is born when two people decide together to change the world, one family at a time. Because true wealth isn't counted in the bank, it's counted in the smiles of those who no longer have to choose between eating and living.